This would be my first time on Earth. Though my human friend has invited me several times, this will be my very first visit. Being an Ornazekarek, it's difficult to get through customs. Most non-natives don't visit due to humans' general, shall we say, mistrust. I don't dare blame them for this. Before meeting us, along as the Marzekshi, they suffered greatly at the hands, claws, tentacles? Let's just say the reach of other species. They almost lost their planet twice, and did lose it once, before fighting like cocaine-infused flying monkeys in order to get it back. Nowadays, they mostly just keep them themselves and only allow other species to enter when they're invited, and only if they are invited. Thankfully, I have all the necessary paperwork. If I didn't, getting through customs would be much more invasive. I don't care what species it is. You do not want a human walking up to you putting on a latex glove. My buddy Hal picked me up from the spaceport, and it was a little difficult to get comfortable in his, what does he call this thing again? A truck? It's no way to be comfortable, especially when I have no really good place to put my tails. Thankfully, we stopped soon to have some human cuisine. The only issue on hand was making sure that they do not put any capsaicin in. I cannot handle any capsaicin. I really do not want to have to sprint to the foliage or hang my tails out the window like I did last time. My human friends laughed about that one for weeks. After our very filling meal, Hal took me to see some of his friends that were living here on Earth. As we drove into the rural areas, I would be remiss if I didn't suddenly think about my own home, the town that was nestled deep into the countryside. When Hal visited me, he mentioned this sort of thing before, and I would have enjoyed the view more, but I still had to keep shifting to keep my tail from going numb, at least one of them. We met up with Hal's friends, who met me with a hand claw. Let's say we gripped and shook, and that old predatory smile they all seem to have when meeting you still makes me uncomfortable just a little bit. After conversing for a while, we headed out to the range for some sort of activity. I was confused, as this was not military run, and that is when I heard range used a lot, unless they're talking about cooking. Odd. I was just confused. Before I ended up going to the line, as they put it, I was outfitted with heavy hearing and eye protection. I inquired on how dangerous this activity was actually going to be, as I had seen some of the human sports and how they beat into each other, and they just told me it's just a precaution. Before walking me to the line, I was asked 12 or 20. Hal's friend James held up two different metal cylinders. I recognized them from human cinema. Realizing this would be my first time, I said 12. 12 being smaller than 20, I figured it would suit me better. Considering my species is much smaller and thinner, being the reptilian species I am. James asked, "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "All right," he said, handing me over the cylinders. Hal was inside of the small range hut with two others. James and four others came to the line for my instruction. I had already seen videos of this before and always wanted to try it, and thanks to the video, my rehearsed briefing, very rehearsed seemingly, was very easy to understand as I already understood the parts and the verbiage. Keeping the tube facing down and given a single cartridge, they were watching me close, because before we could start any type of competition or whatever this actually was, I had to be viewed going through all the motion as to make sure to all others know that we would be able to conduct everything safely, especially for myself, which has never done this before. I reached over, opened everything up, and made sure it was good, and the cartridge was placed inside. I closed the chamber of the projectile launcher, raised it up like they showed me, and once I could fully align the sights, which was difficult as this device was designed for humans, but I could just get lined up enough. I set it for the center, just like they told me, lining down the cylinder to the strange bead on the end, and said exactly what they were waiting for. Pull! A moment later, an orange disc came up. I didn't have to move too much at all, as it seemed to come straight through the center. Hastily, I pulled the activator lever, dropping a strange piece of metal in front of me before I could even move or react. The sound that came out from this thing shook me to the core, and almost in a good way, but I didn't have time to think about it. The force of the 12 gauge brake action sent me flying backwards. I could see it all in slow motion. I can still see in my head the orange disc bursting into pieces as I begin to see the sky as I was on my way to the ground. James reached out with one of his manipulators and grabbed the cylinder right out of my claws as I was in flight to the way down. I landed flat on my spine, and I heard many joints pop as I fell flat. This is not a normal position for my species, and it did not feel good. In pain, I tried not to move, internally checking to make sure that all my parts were still attached and still able to move. Around me, I could hear nothing but the sounds coming from humans. The sounds of humans laughing uncontrollably. I turned and looked, and many of them were already on their way to the ground, yet much slower than I was. But apart from that laughing, I could also hear someone running over to me. I didn't put everything together, as the sound of the cartridge being ejected came up the same time the footsteps came. I could then see Hal right over me as he ran up to a stop, somehow able to catch the cartridge out of the air after it had been ejected, and looked at it and then started yelling, "Which one of you assholes gave him the 12 gauge?" "He insisted," James said. Hal looked over to me, and I signaled that James was being truthful. Hal then looks at the spent cartridge in his hand, and I could smell a slight burning of flesh. It seemed as though he was getting a first or second degree burn from the projectile being fired. As I slowly started to get my ability to stand back, I could hear Hal scream again, "Which one of you fuck nuggets gave him the 3-inch high brass shells?" At this declaration I didn't fully understand. All the other humans were laughing so hard that they actually stopped making noise. I knew this was going to be painful for them. I've seen Hal do this before, and when he finally could get air in his lungs, he kept saying, "It hurts, it hurts, it hurts," as it seems their diaphragm cannot handle the sudden pressure that's on it. As Hal kept screaming, they all just kept laughing, to the point that even James was down on one of his knees, laughing so hard he had to put the cylinder on the ground. With my understanding of humans, one thought began to go through my mind as I was barely able to move and crawling back onto my side so I could get up. I know what I have to do. I know what I can do, too. This is what they do to each other. This is one of those, what do they call those? Practical jokes, which are completely impractical. I still don't understand why they call them that. And I realized I had to do something. Looking over at their vehicles as I finally was getting towards my feet, I noticed that all of them had their windows down. Oh, I know what to do now. I just have to find some capsaicin. Oh, wait. Unless he finished it off, Hal has the rest of his spicy chicken wings in the car. Oh, yeah.